The miracle had happened. The gamble had paid off. Late on Monday, the 20th of May, having advanced more than 250 miles in 10 days, troops of Panzer Corps Guderian had reached the Channel coast near Abbeville. Battles and campaigns rarely, if ever, go according to plan, least of all when they are carried out with so many pitfalls and obstacles to overcome, and when so reliant on luck and on the incompetence of the enemy. Yet, to all intents and purposes, this was what had happened. Now, caught in the mightiest encirclement ever in military history, were more than 1.7 million men. The Dutch army already in German hands, the entire Belgian army, one French army and large portions of 4 others, and nearly all the British expeditionary force of 500,000 men, all trapped with their backs to the sea, and just 10 divisions out of Germany's 135 available for the offensive were all it had taken to achieve this extraordinary panzer drive to the coast. The stupefied French, stunned to see German tanks and vehicles, having advanced so far so quickly, seemed to have been powerless to stop them. Guderian and his men were euphoric about their incredible achievement, but had no idea what they were supposed to do next. No plan had been made. Neither von Kleist, nor von Rundstedt, nor von Brauchitsch, or even Hitler himself had dared believe such rapid progress was possible. Thus, he and his men had to impatiently twiddle their thumbs while they awaited new orders. Visiting 2nd Panzer Division, he had asked an Austrian soldier how he had enjoyed the operations to date. "Not bad," the soldier told him, "but we wasted 2 days." While Guderian's men were kicking their heels near Abbeville on the 21st, the great Allied counterattack was getting underway, except that it was barely a counterattack at all, more a kind of demonstration. Only 2 British columns, each consisting of an infantry and armoured battalion, a battery of field artillery and anti-tank guns, and a few recce motorcycles and a few French tanks were all that had been allocated for the task. In other words, less than a division, and rather a pincer movement. It was thrusting south from the north only. Since the French had planned their war in such a way that speed of movement was anathema to them, it was no real surprise that they had failed to come to the party. Gort had issued orders on the 20th for a thrust south of Arras to protect the town and his exposed right southern flank. It had not been intended as a counterattack or part of any large-scale operation, and neither was he expecting French help. Soon after issuing this order, however, Tiny Ironside, the CIGS, had arrived at Gort's command post with orders from the War Cabinet that the entire BEF should move southwest, attacking all enemy forces encountered. Gort was incensed by this order. "A scandalous, i.e. Winstonian thing to do," complained Henry Pownall, and in fact quite impossible to carry out. Fortunately, once at Gort's command post, Ironside quickly realized this too, and so with Pownall in tow went off to see Biotta and Blanchard, commander of French First Army, at the latter's HQ in Lens, to discuss a coordinated counterattack to retrieve the situation. Although this had been imperative for several days, and since the day before a matter of utmost urgency, absolutely nothing had been done by the French to prepare for such an action. The biggest sign of pro-action was the sacking of Gamelin, who had been replaced as Supreme Commander by General Weygand, another Great War commander and now 73 years old. Ironside was shocked by Biotta's increasing hysteria. The French Army Group commander kept repeating his by now well-rehearsed mantra that there was nothing he could do to stop the panzers. At one point he became so overwrought, Ironside grabbed him by his tunic and gave him a good shake. While they were there, Gort telephoned and asked the French to help in the planned action for the following day. This was followed by a call from General Weygand, who equally urged his commanders to pull their fingers out and get a grip of themselves. At last, Biotta and Blanchard agreed to contribute 2 divisions. Since the French had at least 8 in the area, this was not much of a contribution. "Nobody minds going down fighting," noted Pownall after this meeting, "but the long and many days of defense, and recently the entire lack of higher direction and action, have been terribly wearing on the nerves of us all." It was an odd thing to say. After all, the battle was hardly a cricket match. The mayhem was getting to them all. Despite their assurances, however, it soon became clear that neither Biotta nor Blanchard had any intention of taking part in the counterattack at all. Biotta spent the rest of the day discussing whether an ammunition dump should be saved or blown up to prevent it falling into the hands of Germans, rather than marshalling his troops. At 1st Army HQ, Blanchard passed the buck to Altmaier, commander of French 5 Corps, but the latter informed his army commander that his men might be too tired to fight. Captain Reid, Blanchard's British liaison officer, visited Altmaier and found him sitting on his bed, crying silently. Neither Reid nor Archdale at Botha's HQ could then get hold of Gort or Pownall. So, not until the following morning, a few hours before the attack was to begin, did the British learn that the French would not be contributing, save for a few tanks. As it happened, the British thrust south of Arras seriously knocked Rommel's combined force of 7th Panzer and Waffen-SS Totenkopf divisions. At one point, as British armour was threatening to overrun Rommel's troops, the German general took personal command of an artillery battery sited in a quarry on the crest of a long, shallow hill. The British were pushed back after a day of hard fighting, but it had given the Germans a severe shock. For the first time since crossing the Meuse, Army Group A had encountered some serious opposition. Von Rundstedt called it a critical moment in the drive, adding that, for a short time it was feared that our armoured divisions would be cut off. Had the Allies managed to coordinate a combined counter-attack from both north and south, and in force, the Germans might yet have been checked, but it was not to be. Not that General Weygand, the spry septuagenarian brought in to put some steel back into the French, was giving up just yet. After all, he had not been brought in to do nothing. Nonetheless, matters hardly improved, and once again it was communications, or lack of them, that were one of the biggest problems. On the same day that the British were thrusting south of Arras, Weygand held a conference in the Belgian town of Ypres, now rebuilt since its destruction over 20 years before. By the time Gort finally got there, having been in the middle of a command post move and then struggling through the swathes of refugees clogging the roads, Weygand had already left. Botha was also late, but deciding to crack on with the conference anyway, the Belgians eventually agreed to fall back a short way, taking over part of the British Northern Line. Part of French First Army would also take over part of the British line, thus freeing troops to take part in the proposed counterattack. By the time Gort eventually turned up, the plan was presented to him as a fait accompli. It was a hopeless idea, not least because the main British lines of supply from the south had already been cut by the Germans. Gort's troops were already getting low on ammunition and food. Furthermore, the 3 British divisions earmarked for the attack were blatantly not enough for the task set them. Gort could have refused, but did not. Nonetheless, how Weygand could have thought that these complicated troop movements could have enabled attack to be made the following day, only he could have known. As it was, Gort soon put the kibosh on that. First, he insisted that the BEF, which up to then had been keeping the Army Group B at bay quite successfully, should fall back to the French-Belgian borderline on the night of the 22nd, 23rd of May. The following night, the Belgians would relieve 1 British division in the north of the line, and the French 2 in the south. That meant the 3 divisions needed for the attack that had been released would not be ready until the 26th of May at the earliest. No one was happy. The British felt it was a pig of a plan. The Belgians suspected they were being abandoned, and the French felt not enough was being done. Then, as Botha was driving back to Lens, he was involved in a car crash and later died. No replacement was found for him until the 25th of May. Why it took 4 days to appoint a new Army Group commander was anyone's guess. The next day, Wednesday the 22nd of May, the French did attempt a counterattack at Cambrai, but it was beaten off, while German infantry was now catching up the panzers, and together pressing hard on the beleaguered British units at Arras. The chances of there being any counterattack at all on the 26th were diminishing rapidly. We are down to about 2.5 days' rations, and 300 to 400 RPG, rounds per gun, noted Pownall on the evening of the 22nd. Enough for only 1 defensive battle. A very tight corner indeed.